Hey guys, it's May May and welcome back to the master bedroom redo. Now I know we're not in the bedroom at this point in time, but we're going to make some things that I have wanted for a very long time, and they are birch bark candlesticks. Now here's what's interesting. I was at Michael's Sunday and they have the most beautiful birch bark like wood candlesticks and wood logs, and even, I mean, just amazing. And so I picked them up and I was like, man, this was like paper. I mean, it really feels like paper. I don't even know if they weren't fake. I gotta be honest, because they felt like paper and I couldn't tell the difference. So I was like, I'm gonna see if I can't do these myself. So, because I'm trying not to spend money, I'm trying to show you guys ways to do this without spending a lot of money. So I'm really sticking, tight with the money. So anyway, what you're gonna need first is some regular old copy paper. This is just some I had at my computer, and look, it has like a spot on it, so I can't use it for anything else. So I've just saved it for this. And listen, if you are a person who cuts things out of computer paper and has scraps left over, save them, because this is what you can use them for. Okay, so what you're going to do first is, I have some wax paper underneath. I'm going to flip it over because it's curling on me. There we go. What you'll do first is you'll take and tear strips. The strips do not matter. Have fun. Just kind of play. You don't care if they're long or short or what have you. Just tear. Now once you see this completed and you see how the process works, you'll be able to decide how many strips of paper you need based on the project you're doing. I had a lot of fun doing this. I just kind of sat down and played and figured this out. I did go online and look at pictures. Something that I've learned from a lot of artists artists, not like me, not just, I feel like I'm the cook and a bunch of chefs. That's what I feel like. So a bunch of artists that I watch, a lot of times we'll look at real life photos or still lifes or things like that to get inspiration, and that's kind of what I did. Okay, so now I'm going to tear these willy-nilly in half. Don't care how they tear. Just into smaller pieces. Don't have to do them one at a time. Watch this. This is 3. Done. Okay, now just lay these out on your wax paper. Just so that you can pretty much see all of them. And wet them with water. Now we're just using water, so you don't really have to protect your surface too much, but I wanted to be able to do this kind of quick. So once I've got this done, I just kind of go through and squeeze it like this. Just pick up the papers, give them a good squish, and then lay them out, leaving those wrinkles in it. If you don't get enough wrinkles, add some more. This is kind of a head start for us. You don't have to necessarily do this part if you're in a hurry. You can just wet it with Mod Podge or glue, but I thought this would be a good way to get me a good texture going in case I lost it with the glue, because sometimes I can get a little overhandy with my brushes and stuff, and this will kind of help me keep that texture. So just squeeze them all up and kind of pull them out and leave them to dry. You basically are making your pieces of bark at this point. I'm telling you, the bark feels like paper anyway. And now, just sit these aside to dry, or use your heat tool and dry them quicker. I'm just going to sit them aside because I've already got some made. Now these I made last night. A couple of things I really like is how the paper changes its texture and really becomes bark-like. And I think that's cool. So, there's those. We won't need these right this second. I'm going to show you a couple things. The next thing I have is a piece of gray, really thick cardstock. This cardstock is really thick. I don't know what poundage this is, but it's not chipboard and it's not regular cardstock. It's kind of in between. So that's what I'm going to be using here. And you're going to need some sort of glue. I'm just going to use some tacky glue. Now we're going to squirt this glue down across, going in this line like this. And this is going to create some texture for your birch. And see how I'm just kind of doing like this, and it doesn't have to be perfect. The one thing I do think is you do need to make sure that your lines stay in that direction. Now then, take these pieces of bark you have and stick them down. Just kind of randomly. On top of those those lines of glue. And the reason for that is I want to be able to have some lift up texture. I don't want to glue everything down smooth. So just let it catch in some of those lines. I like that piece very much. Just put them down wherever you can stick them. Just like so. You do not want to adhere your edges down. These edges are going to come in handy later. Alright, so there is step, what is this? 1 is tearing the paper. Step 2 is using the cardstock and the glue. Step 3 is putting this on. So let's go to step 4, which is let this dry, and then we're going to paint it in a coat of black. Okay, so as you can see, I have dried this pretty good with my heat tool. Now these little globs of glue are still white, but that's not going to matter because they're wet on the inside, but they're pretty firm on the top. So we're going to kind of hurry it up for the video, but if you had time to let them dry completely, that's fine. When I was doing my sample, I kind of set it up, let it sit, went and made dinner, came back, they were completely dry, no big deal. But these are just going to turn out looking like knots in the wood, so we don't really care if they're perfect, you know, and the paintbrush will glide over them. Okay, so now we're going to use some acrylic paint. I'm just using some from Apple Barrel, and it's black. And I have my palette off the, can you see it? Yeah, a little bit. So I just have black on my palette, nothing else. And we're just going to cover this in black. And do not panic, it will look good, I promise, when we finish. Paint the black on. And at this point, you don't want to see anything but black. So we're going to cover the whole thing in black. Now, I'm not worried about underneath the paper. Get it to where when you're looking at it, all you see is black. And that's all we're worried about. You don't have to get underneath the paper or anything. That's going to add to the character later. I kind of think I overworked it last time, but this time I'm going to try to do it even better. So I'm not lifting up underneath the paper unless I can see, looking at it, if I can see white. And that's what I'm doing, making it solid black. Alright, so we're going to just keep painting, paint all of this solid black, and then we will come back and start on our next step. So while the black is drying, we're going to mix up a little bit of gray. And I mean, I should say a light gray. So I'm going to put white into the center of my palette. And then I'm going to put a touch of black. And I'm actually going to put the black over here in a different hole. And this way I can add it as I need it. So I'm going to take just the same brush I was using. I'm going to go ahead and start mixing it up. Get that paint onto that brush, load it up good. Touch it into there and bring it in. You're going to do this until you achieve a light gray. You don't want to, and you may already have a gray. Let's see that. Let's see. You might can look in your paint stash and pull out a gray. I didn't have one. So that's what I'm doing. We're going to use what we got. I'm thinking about doing a use what we got week. Tell me what y'all think, where we do projects that look like we had a lot more than we really had, and we're going to just use what we got to make it happen. Tell me what you think about that idea. Okay, there's a very pale gray. Don't worry if you don't have enough. We can always come back and mix up some more. It doesn't have to be perfect, because remember, things in nature are very, variegated and modeled. So move that aside for a bit. I'm going to bring back in our black paper now, and it has dried for the most part. If any of it streaks, it's no big deal. I did use my heat tool on it, so if you need to do that, or if you feel like you need to, go ahead. And now we're just going to cover our work with this light gray color. Do not worry about it. It's going to look good. You're not dry brushing. You're just kind of going over without overworking. Just something like that. Like I said, I'm loading my brush, so I'm not dry brushing. I'm just kind of making a mess. The one thing I want to caution you about is the whole time you're doing this, keep your brush strokes going in the same direction. Don't go against the grain of the wood, because if you do that, it'll stop looking like wood and it'll start looking more just like a pattern. Now, if you're going for just a pattern, go for it. But if you want it to look like tree bark, you're going to need to stay with the wood, with the grain of how your wood would go. Alright, so there's our pale gray coat. I'm leaving some showing through. And then we'll go to another coat in 1 second. We'll let this dry and we'll start with our next color. Okay, so our gray is dry, and I want you to notice that I did that layer with a gloss paint. If you can see the shimmer, no big deal. Doesn't matter what textures you use until you get to the top. Now the thing about a tree is it does not have a glossy sheen to it typically, so we're going to use something that's not glossy for the top. And I need it to be very white because that's what's going to create the birch feel, that top layer where it's very white. So I'm going to use gesso. Now, if you had some texture paste, or if you had any white medium that you have that you just really want to use, you can use here, but it needs to be white. You can even use white acrylic paint, it'll be fine, but my white is glossy and I'm using what I've got. So there is a recipe that one of my viewers shared with me for using gesso, baby powder, and turning it into a texture paste, and I'll put that in the description below and tell you who that was. Her name is Tiffany, and I appreciate her. She gave me that, but I have not mixed that up today. I'm just going to use plain gesso for this. Now for this section, I'm going to use one of these brushes. This brush is pretty stained, but I like the bristly part of it, and when we go across, I want it to kind of give it that streaky look. So we're going to load our brush up. Again, I'm not dry brushing because I really want the white to really pop. So no dry brushing. Go in with the grain. Just wet that brush, streak it across. Wet it and streak it. I actually like the way that looks. Because you want it to look like, that's how kind of these birch trees look. If you look them up online, it's just kind of how they look. They look cool. They're my favorite of the trees. I love when the seasons change and we get all the white trees sticking out in the wintertime. If you ask any of my kids, they'll tell you that the white trees are my favorite. Now I'm going to cover a lot of that dark up at this point. Not all of it, but a lot of it, because we're going to come back and add some texture and open up some texture in a second too. So be kind of heavy with your white and let your white be very white. That's what you want. That's the trick. The very white layer here. Okay? Let this dry and we'll come back and do the next step. This is probably going to take longer to dry because it's very, very heavily coated, but just give it all the time it needs. Okay, so what we're going to use to make our candlesticks with is a Planters peanut can. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. Now, I've made one out of the full height already, and I'm good with that one, but I want to turn this one into 2 so I can get 3 varying heights. So what I did was I placed a rubber band around the center of the can, and then I took a ruler and measured, making sure I was 2 inches from the bottom. Well, I was right the first time. I took a ruler and measured all the way around, just lining up at 2 inches with that rubber band. Then I took my marker and laid beside the rubber band and traced it. And I did that on camera for you to see, and my camera was turned off, so I apologize. So now I can remove this rubber band, and I'm going to cut this line using my X-Acto knife. Now listen, this is not going to be for everybody. Let's be very careful with this and do, have parental supervision and all that good stuff for this one, because this can be dangerous. And you can do it with your scissors once you make a good mark. So instead of my X-Acto, I decided to try scissors because I think this might be safer, and so here's what I've done. I've punctured a hole into the can, and then, and I don't want to do this on camera because the squeak is more than you can handle, then you slide it around just like you're slicing, and you just follow your line. And now at the end, instead of taking a chance of cutting myself, I'm just going to snip it. Like so. So now we have 2 levels, which I really, really like. Okay, so now that you've cut them in half, you end up with this. Now, I had an extra can of peanuts, so I had another lid that I've saved. I'm going to put it on top of this one, so that'll give me a base for a candle to sit there, and then I will paint this side. Now, for this side, underneath, I'm just going to put a piece of paper here, because I'm going to put felt on the bottom anyway, and it's not going to hold anything, it's just going to sit, so that'll be fine. So the next step we want to do is paint these tops with gesso, just to be like a base layer for them. Okay, so we're back to our birch bark. Now this is pretty much dried. The only thing we're going to do now is add a little bit of black definition. So you're just going to take just your regular old black paint. You may already have some on your palette. I wash mine out in between each time. Just a little bit of that. And I'm going to use a fan brush. But if you don't have a fan brush, no big deal. Just use like a piece of paper or anything that'll give you a straight slap line like this. A piece of paper, maybe you have a toothpick, even if you rubbed it in the paint and touched it down or anything like that. So I'm going to take my fan brush, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tap it and get those edges coated, okay? And then I'm going to just tap along this to make those little pieces in the bark that do that. I don't know what that is. Whatever that is that it does. And you can have some darker than others and some lighter, some more wispy. You don't want to have necessarily a pattern, but, you know, they do go with the grain. I do know that from looking at pictures. Then, some of them are closer together than others. So kind of come back in and make that happen too. They're almost in line sometimes. Not all of them, but some of them. And some of them just are longer. So just play around and make that look like you want it to look, because, you know, this is your tree you're creating. You just don't want it to be, you know, you don't want any symmetry here necessarily. And if you want to, you can drag the brush and get some really cool endings to those. So see how that looks? I just think this looks so cool. And when you, I mean, look, it's paper and we're making it look, it's a faux treatment, but that's okay, because by the time you get it all put together on your project, you'll be able to see how it looks really, really very much like the birch. Now this needs to dry, and we have one less step to get this done. Okay guys, and now the fun part. This is completely dry, and you can do this with a needle or a craft pick or whatever you have. I don't have a craft pick, so I'm going to use this needle, a straight pen, anything will do. And what you're going to do is find these folds in the paper that you had created with all the pieces underneath. You're just going to take the needle and kind of dig into them and lift them up. And they're kind of rubbery right now, and that's good because look how that does. Can you see that? You're just going to lift those pieces up. And this is where you get the feel of the bark releasing. And you get some gray underneath it because we didn't paint all the way through. And you get the black showing through on the paper because we had that on there. This is where you get all your textures. And you just want to play. And if you can release some of the fiber from the paper underneath, it looks even better. You just want to go through here and rip it so that you have pieces sticking out and then mess it up. It's so cool. This is the fun part. I hope you stuck around till we got to this part, because I'm telling you, this is where it gets fun. If you did, and you know, leave a comment. You got to stick around for this part, right? Because this is the fun part. I made sure one this way, and then I'm going to tear this one this way. And look how good that looks. Oh, I love it. The texture is so much fun. You can just take that needle and scratch at it. Just get it to kind of open up. Have you seen birch trees, how they do this? You could, at this point, once you get all this lifted up, come in with some green, like a moss paint, and kind of tap that into a color, because I do know that some of these birch trees get that moss look. Anywhere you had the paper that we glued down underneath is going to give you good lift and texture. That's a great piece there. I'm in love with this. I love birch trees, and I just think this gives such a good faux look. So if you don't want to cut any trees down in your yard and you don't have anything available and you don't want to go buy it, this is how you get it. Okay. Can you see the texture? How cool is that? And I really think using the gray paper underneath really helps because it gives you a dimension of color. So there's that part. Now let's finish our candlesticks. Okay, and now for the fun part. We're going to cover these, and I'm going to make the base for this. Let's make the base first. Here I have a very thin sheet of chipboard, and what I'm going to do is just trace this and cut the circle and glue it on. Really simple. It's not going to be very obvious, so we're not too stressed about how it turns out. You just need something to close your candlestick up on the bottom. And to be honest, depending on where you were putting this, you wouldn't even have to worry about this part, but it's going to be on a bedside table, I think, in my room, so I want to make sure it's got a base on it. Okay, now before I glue this down, because I'm going to sit this aside to dry, I'm going to go ahead and measure this so I can cut my birch paper down to size. I got paint on my mat. I try so hard not to do that. Okay, ruler's here. This is the top one, and I'm going to need paper that is right at 3 inches. So I'm going to cut 3 inches for this one, and I think the other one's 2 inches. I think we already measured that one, but let's double check. It's really close to 2. I'm going to cut it just slightly under 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and glue this down. You could use hot glue, but I'm going to sit this aside for a minute anyway, so this will be fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on this one. Let's get the paper cut. I need almost 2 inches and right at 3 inch. I'm going to use my paper cutter, and you're going to want to make sure that your paper that you're cutting is very dry as far as the paint goes, because you don't want to leave that behind in your blade. This paper gets very leathery, which I think is super cool. So, all right, so let's cut a strip that is 3 inches, right about there. And it will cut because it doesn't go rock hard, and plus this is one of those rotary cutters that will do that. So there's my first strip, and now let's cut a 2-inch strip. Okay, so now we're ready to glue this guy down. And you want to decide what part is the back side. This one's a little bit wide still. You need to cut it down a little. Okay, so we're going to glue it on. Now one thing you're going to notice is that I'm using some glitter glue in my hot glue gun. It's because I don't like it. So I'm going to use it out where you won't see it. So I'm just going to put it on here. I don't think it'll matter. I don't think anybody will see it. You know, I'm going to cover it up with the paper, but I don't know. I tried using it and I just don't like this glue. So use what I got. I'm not going to waste it. Just stick that and hold it for a bit. I'm just going to keep gluing it in place. That lip helps you get it pretty straight too, the lip on the edge. So I cut myself a strip just big enough to cover this spot that is open. I'm just going to place that there. That's all going to get covered up because we're still going to add another embellishment, so no big deal. And that's kind of in the back, so you don't really see it. Now, I'm still a little wet up here, so I'm going to let this dry a little more, and then we're going to paint this in a khaki color. So I'm just going to sit this aside, let it keep drying. Okay, so I've covered both of them now. Don't they look cool? I mean, I want to show you some up close. Look, it just looks like paper bark. I think it is so super cool. Okay, let me show you another one. See this one? It just looks like bark. Okay, so now I want to paint the tops of these in a khaki color, which is actually khaki from, it's Craft Smart Khaki is what I'm going to use. And I don't mind this gesso-y texture because it's going to look like wood, you know. We're going to have it sitting on a block of wood. And I'm going to just get this color on here. I'm not trying to get a solid coat or anything. I do want color everywhere, but I don't care how solid it is. I don't mind if some of that dark from the lid comes through. I think it adds to the character. Plus, I'm going to have a candle sticking on top, so. Okay, and then I'm going to take it to the side, and I'm going to paint the lid, the blue portion of the lid, just to give it a trimmy edge. I like the way it turned out on my other one, so I thought I would do the same here. We're just kind of cleaning up our work, and it really makes the birch pop. From what I saw at Michael's, the wood inside of what they had, like I said, I don't know if it was real or fake, but what they had was actually a very pale khaki color. The wood portion was. Look how much cleaner and neater that makes our candle holder look. Okay, we'll do this one. I'll take some photos and try to get some really close-up shots of these for the blog, so that way if you want to see them up close, it will help. I think you'll really get to see how they look, especially, this looks pretty neat to me where this kind of lifts up. Some of the bark kind of lifts up. I think it's neat looking. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to do for the paint is paint the very edge on the bottom. Now remember, this one has a little tin edge, the other one doesn't, because we kind of created the base, so we're just going to fake it. Okay guys, so the last part, we're painted on top. We've got our birch all the way around, and now I'm going to do the last little bit of embellishment. What I've done is taken a strip of burlap, and I've cut it because I'm going to wrap it around it, and I'm going to glue it at the back where that seam is. Remember I told you it wouldn't really show anyway, so I'm just going to put some glue down. Place my burlap, just like so, then wrap it around. And you want to go back and make sure you're good and straight, because you can move it, but you want it to be fairly straight. Then a little more glue. Then stick it down, and we'll cut off the excess. Okay. Then I'm going to add another embellishment around it. Just kind of go around and even it up. Okay. Remember I talked about using what you have? Well, I have this ribbon, but obviously that doesn't work. But if I turn it over, it's just black, so we're going to use that. I didn't have any black in the width I wanted, and nobody's going to see this, so this is how we're going to do it. Going to run a little bit of black ribbon around the center. I just want it to have, I just want it to have a little more tailored look. They're durable too. Okay. Bring this one down a little bit before I stick it all in place. Trim off that little edge that I don't need. Good, nice and clean and neat. Okay, one more piece of embellishment. I bought this twine at the Dollar Tree a long time ago. I'm sure they still have it. It's in the hardware section for like tying down things. What I'm going to do is wrap it twice. So I'm just going to do it like this before I put it onto the can. I think it'll be easier. The can, I should say candlestick, because it used to be a can. It is no longer. And then I want to find the back. That's the back. So I want to go to the front here and tie a knot. That's what we're going to start with. It'll be easier with this twine to just go ahead and tie a knot. It's kind of a slick twine, so you have to kind of get some control on it wherever you can. Okay, so now I've got that. I'm going to cut it away from my spool. I'm going to go back here and kind of even it out, because I want those to be in the center of that. Don't have to be perfect. Okay, and now we're just going to tie a bow here. Trust me, you don't have to make this one look rustic, because this stuff doesn't tie a good bow. So you're going to get what you get with this one. That one's not bad. I guess the third one's the charm, because I already tied the other ones. Cut some of that off. Okay, so there's one of our candlestick birch logs. This is the little one we've been working on, so now we have these to sit together. And then this is the one that I created as my very first one. It's the tallest, so they'll kind of sit in a group like this. And you can't tell now how good that looks, but you'll be able to see it in pictures. So I'm going to turn this over and let you take a look. There's that one. And there is texture. You just can hardly see it on that side. Then there's this. Isn't that cute? Okay, I'm going to take them to my room, put them in place, and get some pictures for you. Hey, thanks guys for joining me. This is another one of our master bedroom projects, and I'll be doing more starting tomorrow. See you soon. Bye-bye.